Hey guys, Brian Castro from Better Chess Training. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about gathering and applying ideas in chess. Now, this isn't a new profound thought that we need to gather ideas from different sources and then try to apply them in our games. But what I want to do today is just give you a little reference guide on where to find these ideas and then what to do with them so that they will be applicable, so they'll come up in your mind when it is time to play them. And then I'm going to show you a couple interesting examples from my own play and how I use these ideas. So let's get started. Okay, first let's look at the sources of ideas. The first one is your own games. And this should probably be the primary one because learning from your own experience is very effective, especially if you are willing and able to learn from your mistakes so that you don't repeat them in the future. And as I'll show you in an example in a couple minutes, learning from your mistakes and gathering the concepts behind why the mistake happened, both positionally as well as emotionally and mentally, can be very effective in future games. The second source of idea is your opponents. So after each of your games, I encourage you to, if you have the opportunity, to discuss with your opponent some of their ideas, especially if they had if they took advantage of something that you did. Ask them what they were thinking or what they saw in your position, and I think that will be very beneficial for you as well. The third one is probably the most common, is chess books. Actually, the next two, chess books, and including ebooks here, because I've been starting to use more ebooks like on chessable.com, which I recommend you check out, and I had several videos about that. Also chess videos, like here on YouTube, like you're watching, and that's actually, and won't get into this too much, but this is why the style of the videos I make, I try to find games and positions that are rich in themes that can be applicable to many types of openings and many styles. So, and then the final one would be coaches. If you are fortunate enough to work with a coach, they can often give you a lot of insight into the openings and the games that you play, and those ideas are very valuable for your own future games. Okay, what do you do with these ideas? You need to catalog them, have a way to store them, and so you could review them, which we'll go over in a second. So what should you be cataloging? Look for specific positions, and then you're going to analyze these positions. Now, as you can see here in the notes, you want to annotate them. So you want to put in your own words your description of the ideas, okay? And I don't want you to worry too much if they're not the most eloquent. And you might even start out by, like, if there is a note in a book and you like the way that the author said it, you can maybe copy it or summarize it. But over time, I want you to make it into your own words. And we've talked about this in my video on how to study chess books more effectively. But that process of turning something that you read or study and then creating your own, recreating it in your own words, is a very effective way to learn. Okay, the other thing I have here is to limit your chess engine analysis. And I'll tell you a very quick story about, I was playing someone and he actually beat me, but afterwards he would just copy and paste the chess engine analysis onto, it was online, so he would, and with the evaluation, and it's like he couldn't think for himself. And I was trying to converse with him about the ideas behind certain positions, and he would just copy and paste the engine analysis. So I don't know how effective that will be for his long-term development. But the point is that chess engines cannot tell you the ideas or the reasons behind a move. It can only tell you it's like a calculator. It can tell you what it thinks the best move is and maybe show some, the line of analysis. Now, as you get stronger, you'll be able to interpret that more effectively, but you really want to understand the positions yourself. It's kind of like, looking at that math analogy. doing the math by hand yourself and understanding why each step, as opposed to plugging into a calculator or a formula on a calculator that just spits out the answer without understanding. So really try to limit your chess engine analysis, especially when you're cataloging these ideas. You want to put the moves in the variations that make sense to you, and not worry as much about the overall, chess engine truth, I guess you could say. Because what we're doing here is trying to create a base of knowledge that you can apply. So using chess engine analysis without understanding it is not going to help you there. Okay? Second thing, besides actual positions, you want to catalog rules of thumb. We've heard like knight on the rim is grim, or knight on the rim is dim. So that would be a rule of thumb that teaches us, a general principle about chess, which is be careful about putting your knights on the edge of the board where it doesn't have much scope. Well, there's many of these in chess, and you can actually create your own with positions or just on their own. So you want to catalog those as well. You can use flashcards, and we'll talk about that in our next slide. How you can do that, okay? And finally, you want to be able to tag the positions so that you can associate them with other knowledge you have. And different ways of doing that would be tagging it by opening. So, for example, you might play the Sicilian defense. So, common tactical theme is exchange sacrifice on c3 in, for example, the dragon variation. So, when you find these positions, in your annotations, you might want to somehow include that this is from the Sicilian defense, okay? Or by the player. Maybe there's a common move like Magnus Carlsen that he does a lot in his games. I was watching a video by Daniel King, and he talks about, this is a move, these are the types of moves that he likes to play. So you could put his name, in the position. If the position itself isn't from a Carlsen game, you might want to include that. And that will help you to associate it with other ideas from that same player. And then finally, naming the theme and motif is very important. So like for tactical themes like pins and forks, deflection, you want to have this vocabulary both so you can remember it yourself, but also when you're conversing with other players, having a common vocabulary will help you to communicate the ideas better. So tag your positions. The one software I use, SuperMemo, I actually use hashtags so that when I look up things, I can look up, for example, positional ideas. I can look up, and then all of the positions that have that tag will pop up, and then I can study them. Okay? So catalog your ideas. Okay, our final slide here before I show you the examples is to review and revise those ideas. And this is really the step or the part of the process that I think a lot of players neglect, because it takes time and it does take effort, but it is this step that'll help solidify that knowledge in your mind and really be able to apply it. And when I show you the examples in a minute, it will make a lot of sense. So here, when we're talking about reviewing and revising, you want to take, so when you catalog those ideas, you want to have them in a database, or as you can see at the bottom here, software solutions like SuperMemo, Anki, or Chessable, where you'll have these positions stored and be able to look at them at a later date. That will strengthen those memories in your mind, as well as, if you study something at one point, at 3 months later, you might have some other knowledge or other examples that will help to strengthen that idea in your mind. Okay, so you want to look at material from a different angle. That way, like I said in previous videos, maybe in one case you look at it in context of the opening structure, or in another case maybe from the tactical nuances. And so you want, each time you review it, you look at a different aspect of it. Okay, associating new knowledge with other sources. This goes back to tagging. For example, when you see a certain motif or position and you remember it from a previous game, you might want to put in your annotations, look at that previous game, and then that will help to strengthen that association in your mind. Simplification. A lot of times when you are first studying something, you will type a lot, or write I type it into my computer, the annotations, and it might be lengthy. Over time, you should try to find ways to simplify it, because now as it's more congealed, as the knowledge is more congealed in your memory, you don't need to say as much. And by simplifying it and finding the essence of what you're trying to communicate, this will help you both be able to understand it and remember it more, as well as be able to apply it in the future. Because it's easier to remember a simple phrase as opposed to a 50-word paragraph about a position. Okay, and then finally, take advantage of some software solutions out there. I use SuperMemo and Chessable, and these have a function to bring back ideas or positions that I put into it with on a regular basis using the spaced repetition, which I've talked about before. SuperMemo is not chess specific, so I can maybe give a demonstration on that in another video. Chessable is about chess positions, so you put the chess positions in and it reviews the moves for you. So I like the combination of the both very much. Anki is very similar to SuperMemo. I haven't used it, but I know it's very popular for people who are trying to remember things and use that spaced repetition. So, and I know it's very effective as well. So I would check that out as well and see which one you like better. Okay? So with that in mind, let's look at a couple examples of how I've actually gathered ideas from previous games or previous sources and then applied them to more recent games. Okay, this game was one I played in February of this year in a tournament over the board. And I'm playing black, and this is from a Queen's Gambit Declined. But let me show you the sequence in question. In this particular position, I was worried about white playing knight to g5 and then attacking this f7 square. The problem is, so what I did was I played h6 with the idea that now he can't play knight to g5. And the problem here is that it introduces a weakness here on g6. Okay, and he played rook a to d1, and then I made another mistake here, and I played e4. Okay, and here is the point or the idea that I didn't see, which knight to h4, targeting this g6 square. Now, after some analysis, I did find if I could have played knight to b6, hitting this bishop, and after knight to g6, I could have played something like queen to d6, and then if giving up the exchange for a couple pieces would have been okay for me there. But instead, I played king to h8, trying to get out of this pin. And I got into a little trouble. I won't show you the whole game because I wanted to just show you this one idea. But after f5, queen to e8, knight to d6, and then queen to e7, he wins a pawn. And although we got into some complications later in the game where I could have had some counterplay, in this particular position he has a nice little edge, and he went on to win this game. So just keep that in mind, and I'm going to show you a more recent game where I was able to learn from my mistakes and apply the ideas that I just showed you. Okay, in this particular position, I'm also playing black. This time in the French defense, came about it's a Schlechter variation. It kind of has some Rubinstein type themes in it. But the point is not the opening. But here's the idea here. We could see this bishop here again with this pin. This time against white, and my opponent played h3 here. And if we remember from the position from my game that I just showed you, we now create a weakness on g3. So let me show you what happens here. I play bishop to b7, c3, queen to c7, and here we can see that I took over this diagonal, and at some point maybe g3 could be a spot, but after queen to e2 I play knight b to d7, and here my opponent plays bishop to g5. Well, I play h6, and then he plays bishop to h4. Now, if you can remember from the position I just showed you, there is an idea of taking advantage of this weak square based on this pin here. And I remembered this, of course, and I played knight to h5. Now, after I analyzed this, I could have played this a move earlier, but here my opponent took about 5 minutes to think about this, which is a long time in this game. And he did play, let me just show you a few moves here, what happened. He played b4 to push this bishop off. And actually, already at this point, I can play knight to f4, but to fork these guys here, and then after he moves his queen, played bishop to d6. But I wanted to avoid complications and the deep calculation behind that. Played bishop to d6, and after rook to d1, I played knight to f4, and he placed queen to c2. Instead of taking this bishop, I actually threatened to win a pawn here with knight takes h3 check, which after, if he were to take on h3, then I get a very nice position after bishop takes f3. Let me just show you a few more moves. After king to f1, instead I play bishop takes f3, and after g takes f3, g5. So now I'm threatening to win this bishop, but and actually this was a nice game. I'll have to show you another time, but the idea was recognizing those concepts that I had learned from, because I made the mistake myself. That knight to h5 move, after the game my opponent said, I've never seen a move like that before. And I have seen moves like that before, but the point was, it was used on me, that idea of having that knight take advantage of those weak squares that I created. In this case, my opponent created, was a concept that I learned very painfully from my loss, but fortunately was able to apply in this particular game. Okay, our final example here today is gathering ideas from master games. So this position, I don't know if any of you recognize it, is a game by our world champion, Magnus Carlsen. This is from the Tata Steel tournament earlier this year in January, and he's playing against English Grandmaster Gawain Jones. And here he played a curious move that actually it's not it's just a move that I was a little perplexed by. He played g5, and in my notes I wrote, what is the idea behind g5? And later I realized, and some of you may have realized this right away, the idea here is that he wants to prevent black from closing the king side, because he's got his forces gathered around there. So this move g5 prevents that, and no matter what black does, white will be able to open up this position. So I had that stored away in my in my database after I'd studied this game as something to remember. So let me show you a recent game of mine. Okay, in this position I'm playing white in an online tournament, and we have a bunch of ideas here. I have the open D file here, so I had thoughts over there. I was thinking of maybe breaking open the G file here, but the main thing that was in my mind at this point was, how can I make my pieces more effective? See, this bishop, so even I had moved this rook here in a previous move to attack the queen, which was on e5 at the moment, and I wanted to somehow get at the king, but also take into account all of my other pieces. My rook here on h1, these advanced pawns here. I felt that there had to be a way to, I guess you could say, take advantage of all of the positional aspects of my position. And so I found h5. And this idea here of preventing my opponent from closing the position, which would shut out this rook, as well as kind of make these advanced pawns kind of useless, came to my mind. And I thought exactly of this Carlsen game that I just showed you. Let me just show you what happens here. My opponent plays rook to e5, trying to... the idea here is that if he takes... A couple ideas here is if he takes on h5, I now have this check here, for example. And if he moves here, then I can break open over here, with potential checkmating ideas, for example. The other idea here is that if he plays h takes g5, then I take here, and now this rook is going to have some fun on the h file. So let's go back to the game. My opponent played rook to e5, and actually this, and I could have gone either way. This is actually okay too. I was willing to sacrifice. Actually, it wasn't really a sacrifice here. Early in the game, I had a sacrificial potential here, but just opening up the position now. I'm not worried about this exchange. He plays rook to d8, and here's the position where I could have sacrificed. I play g takes h6. So here he could have won a piece, for example, like this, winning the bishop, but then my pawn is going to promote. Okay, so I played g takes h6, and then g takes h6, and then he stops this, of course, with g takes h6. And so I simplify a little bit, because now I feel that I have a positional advantage. Rook takes d8 check, queen takes d8, and rook takes h6. And we're almost at the end of the game, so I'll just go ahead and show you the rest of the moves. My opponent attacks my rook, and I just drop it back. And here, I knew that this g6 pawn was poisoned for black. He takes it with the king, and then I play f4. This pawn is pinned, so he cannot take this en passant, and his rook is attacked. He plays rook to e7, and now it's mate in 2 with queen takes g2 check. Here my opponent resigned, but you can see here if he plays, for example, here, then this is mate. And of course, if he plays here, this is mate as well. So, but it all started off, or at least it all, I was able to take advantage in this position of this idea of h5 not allowing my opponent to close the position. So thank you, Mr. Carlsen, for your idea. And hey guys, just a couple final thoughts here. I hope you enjoyed those examples. It's kind of what inspired me to make this video. The point is, I think we need to balance our practicing, doing our practice games and our tournament games, and making sure that we're taking the time to really absorb and study both our own games as well as games from others. So, and don't limit your sources. I used to be of the mindset that you should only study games that are very close to your opening repertoire, and I do believe that you should, spend quite a bit of time there, but you also want to study these other top games of these other, of top players like our world champions and the top 10 players, these big tournaments, because there's a lot of obviously good moves being made, and there's bound to be ideas there that you can apply to your own games. So hope this is inspiration for you to maybe continue with habits you already have, but maybe create some new habits. If you're not cataloging your ideas or tagging your ideas, start doing that, and it will really help you to take that study time that you're already doing. Remember, I know you're all studying your master games, you're all studying your tactics, and I just want to help you to make it more applicable and more something that you can actually utilize as a weapon in your own games. So with that in mind, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please press the like button. And if you're not already a subscriber to this channel, Better Chess Training is about helping you to get better at chess. Really helping you to be the hero of your own chess story. And if that is something that you are trying to be, allow me to join you on your journey. And I wish you the best of luck, and I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.